Okay, everyone, this is part two of our Photoshop tutorials. We are going to be talking about image adjustments, and so we can get this to sink in a little bit better into our scene. So we have a highly vibrant apple and we have a very dull DC day. So let's do some changes here. Now, I'm going to go down here, make sure I'm on layer 2, and then I'm going to go to image mode, image adjustments, and we have a variety of different things. Now, there's some that I really use a lot in here. There's some that I don't ever really use. I'm going to first start with brightness and contrast because this is a quick and easy way that you can make adjustments. Brightness will make things look brighter until they're really washed out, or you can make them look much darker, right? So I might want to consider darkening this apple a little bit so that doesn't have such high contrast on a dark day. Contrast, well, more contrast will give a variety, wider range between light and dark. Low contrast will make things kind of merge together a little bit more. So something like this could be much better for this dull kind of day. I'm going to hit cancel and show you the others. All right. The other ones we can look at would be levels. I use levels an awful lot. This gives you a histogram of the percentage of lights and darks in your image. And if we take the lights and bring them over to the left, you see this gets much brighter and almost washes out. Okay. If we take the darks on the left and bring them to the right, you can see that this will get very dark. Okay. And the middle adjustment will keep those highs and lows and allow you to subtly darken or lighter your composition. So this can be a good way to add different levels of contrast to your object. Hit cancel and move on. Other things that I use quite a bit would be hue and saturation. This is great for, well, you can make things look really crazy, like the opposite colors, okay? You can also change the saturation, which can be really helpful. So completely zero saturation will give you a black and white image, all right? 100% will give you something very garish looking. But in this case, I think I would reduce the saturation just a little bit to give more of that gray kind of look. Lightness does the same thing in that it can really wash this out like almost ghostly all the way to white, or it can make it really, really dark, almost all the way to black. Okay, and so this can be really helpful when you're working with trying to reduce the amount of tone in an object. Okay, cancel, show you some others. The other thing I use quite a bit is color balance, and this is where you can tweak very subtle elements. So if I want to click on the highlights, for example, I can make those highlights much more yellow, right? Or even a little red, warmer overall, okay? Shadows, I could change that as well, and I can move this to be more cool shadows. So there's a little bit more contrast overall between color ranges. This can give you a much different effect. If you ever want to preview what it looks like before and after, there's a little preview check bar in most of these things. Just click it on or off to see where you were, where you're going. All right. So in this case, I think we're pretty good. I'm going to just take the levels. Actually, I'm going to take hue and saturation and desaturate this a little bit. And I'll make it just a little bit brighter. And that should be pretty good for our scene. All right. Next step is let's bring in another character to look at this apple. And so I'm going to go to Google and grab a figure. Now I was working on this previously, so I already have one in mind. I looked up some museum goers and I'm going to use this image from Getty Images. And I noticed it's a little bit smaller than my minimum requirements. It's not so bad because I'm going to use a small part of this composition anyway. Control click, copy image. And in this case, what I'm going to do is kind of work outside of my project. It might just be a little bit easier. So here what I'm going to do is do Control or Command N, okay, to create a new project, create. And then I'm going to paste this in, Command V, Command or Control V. And then I'm going to crop this first before I try to select subject, right? I'm just going to crop in around this figure and see if I can get rather close. Now I have this set right now to square. I'm going to go to original ratio and then just work. Actually, I want to clear that. I just want ratio. I don't want it to be the same ratio. I want to crop into this. So crop in closer to the image like this to work from here. Okay. If you do Command 0, it'll bring it up full screen. Now, before I do this, I'm just going to lighten it up a little bit more, make it so that the computer is a little easier to grab the subject. So select subject. Let's see how we do. Well, that's great. So I'm gonna hit copy. I'm gonna go to my project and hit paste. Okay, so I've got this little figure in here, kind of gazing at the apple. And that makes the apple look humongous, but she also looks really small compared to the scene. So I think I'll blow it up a little bit. Command T to blow this up a little bigger. That looks a little bit better in terms of the proportion of, just hit enter or return to get that to work. So that this looks better in terms of its relationship to the apple and the stairs. All right. Sometimes you'll see in architectural renderings that they really kind of like silhouette out the figure, or sometimes even fully or partially. You can do that with hue and saturation. So Command or Control U will bring up that, and we'll just drop the saturation down a whole bunch. Okay, for black and white. And then I'm also going to make it really dark. I like to retain a little bit of the information of the figure, so I'm going to keep it something like that. Another thing that you'll see often is more of a translucent figure, so you can see more of the project through. So to do that, you can actually go to the layers. And under layers, you'll notice there's an opacity tab. So if you click that open, you can use the slider and make this more, I'm sorry, less opaque, more transparent, right? So if we do that, now we can see the image through the figure, so we can see more of the totality of the object, right? Which I think is really great. So that's a great way to just kind of think about layering in figures, working with transparency, working with, again, selecting subject and cropping out as you go. All right, one last thing I want to do here is make the shadow a little bit darker over here. So I'm just going to grab these tools, which are really helpful, which are the dodge and burn tools. This is from darkroom technology, or used to physically block out the light or take and add more light to an area. So dodge will make things lighter and burn will make things darker. So I'm going to grab this burn tool and I'm going to go to the apple and I'm going to make sure that I am burning. Let's start with the midtones, and my exposure is 50%. If you do 100%, it might be too dark. I'm just going to paint this on here so there's a little bit more darkness underneath, like this. And then I'm going to go to the shadows. There we go, and paint the shadows a little bit more. This gives me a little bit more contrast underneath this object, and that can be a great way to work. But again, you can, any of these areas, you could go in, kind of like dodge and burn, make area elements darker, use it very subtly to add more contrast and details to your forms. All right, that concludes part 2. We'll move on to part 3 in a minute. See you soon.